Joe, tell us about Longlegs.
Longlegs is directed by Osgood Perkins, Oz Perkins, who's Anthony Perkins' son, just for context, and it's of
Very
interest.
cool. That's my
it's
kind
of, it's of interest.
That's my kind of nepo baby.
It's cool, right?
Anthony Perkins' son, that rules.
And he makes horror movies.
Yes.
So it's like, okay, cool, love that. Well, he made his new movie Longlegs. It stars Micah Monroe, who was the woman in It Follows and in Watcher. She's great. And she is, in this movie, she plays the Jodie Foster character. She's the young, up-and-coming, inverted or what do you call that, Brett? Like,
introverted.
Introverted, thank you. Introverted FBI agent who's sort of a savant of connecting the dots, and she's brought into this high-profile case to find this serial killer who's leaving mysterious clues a la the Zodiac Killer. This serial killer's name is Longlegs.
And really quickly, I think you're good so far. I think we don't always stress about this. For this movie, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. There's that.
No, you're good. But I think we should. Let's be careful about spoilers for
Fair
Longlegs.
enough. Fair enough.
Yes,
fair enough.
But you're good so far.
That's like
so far, you're just doing the log line.
A woman is hunting this serial killer, Longlegs.
Because there are some fun spoilers. There are some fun.
There's lots of fun
little.
There's lots of fun twists and turns. I'll say up top about this film. I think the film was incredibly hip. It was incredibly crisp in its images, and I thought it was sufficiently creepy and scary. I like part one, he breaks it into 4 parts. Why? Who cares? Act 1 was excellent. I loved it. Act 2, when we get a little deeper into the villain, I loved that as well. And then people don't like Act 3, and you know what? I think that's fair. I think Act 3 perhaps had some weaker elements, but as a whole, this movie, stylish in a not annoying way, like some of the other faux tours, as Brett called them last week. This is sort of like if Ty West was cool and had some ideas left in the tank and a good eye. I really liked Osgood Perkins's frames. I loved Monroe's performance. I feel like the script might do her some disservices at the end, and people complain about her at the end not doing enough or whatever, but I think she just looked amazing on camera. And yes, she's very beautiful, but I mean that he framed her so cool the whole time. She was looking great. Nicolas Cage, this is, I guess, is a spoiler. We already talked about it. He plays Longlegs, the villain.
That's not, yeah, we know, everybody knows
and
that.
He gives a Joker-esque performance in heavy makeup.
He's just
a la Tilda in
full speed
Suspiria.
Yeah.
He's sort of unrecognizable, and he gives a scary Joker-esque creepy performance. And there's creepy dolls in this movie, and there's a lot of excellent horror images. It has a great creep quotient, a scare or two that is really effective. And overall, when it comes to going to the movies in the summer and sitting down and seeing the movie this weekend, and it comes out to be such a grimy, but also confidently handled kind of piece of pop horror, not to be derogatory, but it is.
Yeah.
It's sort of a stylish
compliment, baby. That's a compliment.
Turn that up, and it's very, very, very hip is the word for this movie. And I just found it's effective, and I left and I said I really liked that movie. That movie was really good.
Yeah, I loved the enthusiasm for horror that Osgood Perkins brought to this movie. You could just feel from the very beginning where he's playing around with, similar to La Chimera, playing around with sort of Super 8, 4:3 ratio footage for memories, and then he does the dream of every director when you expand a widescreen.
He expands the frame at one point.
With that beautiful tone of red that he chose as kind of the main color for the movie and for the marketing of the movie. So there's just this immediate enthusiasm for the genre. This guy is psyched to be doing a big swing indie horror movie. Because even though the budget was tiny on this movie, it feels like a big swing. Yeah,
no, the budget was tiny. He makes every frame look rich. That's
where the stylization
and crisp
comes
and
in
cinematic.
handy. It's he makes everything look a little surreal, a little off. He is establishing a mood from the very beginning, and I think that mood is very important because when you do get some little, I don't know, quote unquote plot holes throughout or in act 3 this and that, to me the mood just carried me through the plot holes.
Mhm,
Like plot
mhm.
holes can be overcome. Plot holes are inevitable in movies, and they
Yeah,
can
I'm
really
not
be sort of counterbalanced by just a really strong mood, a real conviction in the tone and style of the movie, and some just great performances. And to me that's what happened here. There are certainly some things where I was like, "Meh," that was like they kind of, there should have been an extra beat or two there to kind of, yeah, develop that plot point or this and that. But these are minor gripes. Overall, this is a really fun, interesting, scary, cool horror movie. Strongly, strongly recommend you see it in theaters. Let's keep that box office going, baby. Up
looks
and up
good.
and up. Let's bury fly me to the moon. I want to see Longlegs at plus 60,
It's
plus
fun.
70 by the end of this run.
It's a good one. Brett, you asked where it ranks on my, horror power
Yes.
rankings, and, it'll end up a 3rd or 4th, but there are 2 new entries that we haven't spoke about on the podcast up there in the top 4, but maybe we'll hit on some of that a little later in the podcast as we
Great.
get into our best movies of the year.
That's good. I think that makes sense. I think this is definitely one of the best horror movies of the year. And there are two like little, minor gripes. They're not even gripes. It's just more of just like a conversation around sort of horror and the making of horror. Um, I did feel like, something that you've mentioned a lot is when directors have this sort of anxiety that their movie is not like interesting enough in every second, and they're constantly trying to like do something to keep the audience engaged, and
The
then
worst.
you could, the opposite example is something like, a movie we're going to talk about later today, Kiyoshi Kurosawa's new horror movie Chime, and he's a master of the form. It's not fair to compare him to Osgood Perkins. He's been working forever, but that movie Chime, which we'll talk about later, is so confident in itself and has no need to like, oh no, the audience is lost interest. It is like so
It
patient
doesn't have to
and
be Kurosawa
masterful.
though, Brett, because how
Yeah,
about The First Omen? Where it
yeah,
was
good
that woman's,
example.
1st or 2nd feature,
Stevenson. Yeah,
and she murders and
yes,
that is a very confident camera on
yes,
First
and she
Omen.
might be showing up on my best of
Yeah,
2024 list
really, I like that, but,
later.
I think that's a great comp because, you know, 1st, 2nd movie,
Yeah,
this is Osgood f this is like 4th, 5th movie, but what I'm saying is early in their career, of course, Kurosawa is gonna knock it out of the park. He
yeah,
he is the master of the form, but I do think it's like The First Omen versus Maxine. You can tell when somebody knows what they want
yeah,
and gets it
yeah,
versus fumbling around for what they may want and then kinda getting it.
yeah.
Yep.
And I did feel that like, like you get like a big quote from a T-Rex song because
Oh, that's cool.
Longlegs is like obsessed with Mark
I
Bolan.
thought that
Also,
was kinda cool.
Mark Bolan.
Yeah.
I loved it because I'm a huge T-Rex
Yeah.
fan, but I was also like Mark Bolan's kind of catching a
Ca
stray
yeah,
here.
yeah, I know.
He is like bar none favorite
But when they
musician
put
of
up
the
the
serial
T-Rex
killer.
lyrics, I was like, "Oh, those are creepy lyrics. I guess I never thought of it there. Oh, that's
No,
fun."
I did. I was like, oh yeah, like Bolan gets a little like occulty with his lyrics, so it was fun. But I was like, I don't need an epigram, and I don't need the chapters. Just make your movie. So
This one
like,
did not
it
need the
did not
chapters,
need the
bro. This
chapters.
was
Why
this
are we
might have
doing the
been this might have been
chapters?
worst use of chapters all
Yes,
year.
so
It
unnecessary.
didn't help,
So
but it didn't
unnecessary.
like hurt. Maybe it hurt Brett because Brett's anti. To me, it was just a what?
Yeah,
And then the names of the chapters. It was like
that
it was
really
A
didn't
A
help.
to A to G. It
That
wasn't even
really
like
did not help.
in Furiosa. It's like A to C, where you're like, oh, I see the thematic link with this chapter. And then in Longlegs, it's like that didn't set up anything.
Yeah, it was a director that was like worried that they were not being interesting enough or not going to be understood, which is the curse
The
I think of
worst.
directors. It's like do not worry that you're not going to be do not try to like I mean certainly think about how the audience is going to interpret your movie, but don't overcompensate because you think the audience is not going to understand the themes of your movie. Cuz the other two things that I would have liked to see a little bit more of here is I mean I don't know. I just want to like the one thing that this movie made me think about is like the importance for me in my favorite horror movies, the importance of establishing like a plane of like normalcy that the horror is going to like play against. I even think of something because I don't want to like set up false comparisons, but if you think of something even like The Shining, which is as hyper stylized of a horror movie as you're going to get, there is a whole the opening is full of dread where they're driving to the hotel, but I think Kubrick very intentionally gives you the normalcy of the hotel before he gives you the horror of the hotel. Where Scatman Crothers is walking around showing them the kitchen and where the food is stored. There's a lot of like routine and normalcy, and that ends up making the horror so much more horrifying. For me, a movie like Longlegs, when it is just like pure mood and pure horror mood and horror aesthetic, almost from start to finish without exception, even like the sort of normal scenes, because also compared to Silence of the Lambs, I love, to me, what some of the most critical scenes in Silence of the Lambs are those early scenes of FBI procedural stuff where you are Demi is so good at establishing Jodie Foster's character in this multidimensional way in those scenes, whether it's battling the sexism of the FBI or her own demons. She has a sense of humor. Like there is this sort of like normalcy and natural rhythm of life that a lot of my horror favorite horror movies establish early on, and then when they go crazy, it's so much more affecting because they're playing against that. Whereas this movie really feels like a sort of dream or a hallucination, kind of the entire movie. And even when you're in the FBI, the sets feel sort of surreal or
Mhm.
off a little bit. And look, I can't really fault him because it's an intentional move. He clearly wanted that mood from start to finish. But I just think when it comes to horror movies, it's really useful to have a little bit more of a sort of plane of normalcy, and also to allow your characters to be a little more multidimensional. I think Micah Monroe's performance was great, but to me the character was just like they she wears her trauma on her sleeve like so hard, even when she's like at work. It's like I like to see people be different at work than they aren't. Like I
I
would
know.
just like
I
to.
was like, "Look, this Gen Z employee is really good." I was like, "Whoa, I didn't know."
I think I would like to see like maintain the aesthetic, but I would like a little more rhythm to the movie where we're
Yeah.
seeing a couple different moves so that when we come back to the horror, it's more affecting. Um whereas this just felt sort of like, hallucinatory start to finish, but not like to the extent of like something like, to use another Nicolas Cage movie, Mandy. It's not that stylized and hallucinatory. So this is a movie where I think Osgood Perkins could have played his played that strong horror mode off of something a little more realistic, and the effect of the movie would have been a little stronger.
I think Micah Monroe navigates the challenge of the sparseness of her character well and kind of provides a depth to it. That scene when she's with the little girl in the bedroom, though she's at her most awkward, is an opportunity for us to kind of get a little heart warmed around
Yeah,
that
and I
character
think that
and
was
kinda get
supposed to be
into
a
her.
little comic
It
relief. Like
was
that hard
totally.
cut to her in the
Yeah,
bed
it was
is
funny.
like there was
That was funny,
a
and that was
little
like a
little
charming
laughter in
little
the
moment,
audience. Yeah.
and I think you're right, but I think this is a good example of, doing tone and doing style and keeping it relatively on the ground, at least for the first half of the film. I think that we could have felt more grounded in her character if some of the act 3 things resolved a little bit more
Mhm,
different perhaps, or a little bit
mhm.
more, just differently. We might have felt a little differently about her performance or about her character, but that just didn't happen. So I know what you mean.
'Cause it is, without spoiling it, it is fully explained why she is the way
Mhm,
that she is by the end of the movie. But
and
even
it's okay.
people like, again, to use Silence of the Lambs, Jodie Foster's character has trauma in her past in that movie, but you grow up and you learn to sort of develop an outward part of your personality that sort of hides your trauma, and to me that makes for more interesting characters where
But she's doing the
the trauma is
savant
not as
thing.
transparent. She is
Micah
doing the
Monroe's
savant
doing the
thing.
Rain Man
Yes.
savant thing.
Yes. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and whether or
Yeah.
not it's 100% successful, remains to be seen, but I think that was intentionally done. I'm not saying and then she does it and it works. I think what fails her is the third act's script. I think it just kinda, like, makes her character less impactful, and we would have been more on board with her performance if it had a better sort of reason
Yes,
or
and I
something.
think if there had been a little bit more work put into like the procedural aspects of the script, like the FBI procedural stuff, because we just sort of have to buy into her being a
Mhm.
not just a, and this is early on in the movie, it's not a spoiler, but not just a savant, but a psychic. It's one
Yeah.
of the first scenes in the movie. It's implying that she has some sort of psychic abilities. Um, I we're just meant to sort of buy in on that. We don't get a lot of like good sort of like procedural like demonstrations of those abilities. I would have liked to have seen like I think like the detective work of the movie could have been a little bit better, and I think then maybe would have made her character come alive a little bit more. Again, I think the performance is great. I found the character like a little one note, a little one
I
dimensional,
think
and
that's
I
fair.
could have used a little more rhythm. But overall, great movie. Nicolas
I
Cage
think so.
is just going 100 miles an hour. He's so wacky and fun. And you just get a lot of like the other thing the last thing I'd like to say is as much as we love this golden age of indie horror that we're in right now between A24, Neon, IFC, this movie's so funny because to me it is a like campy B movie at heart. It has so much just like horror kitsch in it. Creepy dolls, serial killers, satanic stuff. It has so much just fun B movie camp, but it is clearly aspiring to the like to compete with your Ari Asters and your Robert Eggers, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas I want to just I would love I think it's too late. I just don't think there's money for these types of movies or production companies interested in making them maybe. I mean maybe I don't know, you tell me. But like it just feels like it is to get a horror movie made now, you have to be aspiring to like the indie horror aesthetic. Whereas I feel like there's another version of Longlegs where they follow Nicolas Cage's lead a little bit, and it's just like a awesome, campy, wacky, satanic, creepy doll horror movie. But it's a little it still maintains its sort
It's
of
in the
preciousness.
shadow of the elevated horror movement inspired by the
Yes.
A24, and it's also sort of inspired by how prestige TV turned every genre,
Yes.
category into an Emmy award winning melodrama. It also goes back all the way, Brett, to like when the Dark Knight turned superhero movies into dark crime dramas, and how we kind of got to this elevated horror moment. I don't think this movie is emblematic of the failure of that. I think this is a sharp, good-looking movie, but I also know what Brett's
You know what I
saying.
mean? I just
Like,
long
wouldn't it be
for
like Longlegs is a weird, creepy, scary villain? It would be fun to see a little bit more. Kitsch it up. What Brett's saying is kind of true. Osgood Perkins, like, movie too cool and stylish, should be kind of ugly and stupid, right, bud?
That's it.
Like, you know what I mean? Like,
That's it.
should
Yeah,
be a
yeah.
little fucking dumb.
Yeah.
It looks
That's
really
it.
good,
That's it.
dude. It looks
'Cause
scary and nice.
this
What
movement
if it
is
looked like shit?
this movement's based on a false premise that like sort of meaning and artistry always comes from this look
Yeah.
that's put on the exterior, on the outward facing, the face of the movie. Whereas to me, some of my favorite horror, the at first it's like you just relax because the movie is so dumb and silly, and then the meaning like surprises you. It emerges from within the movie. Those are that's some of my favorite horror, and
But I would say, Longlegs is more on the side of good than on the side of try hard. I think I
100%,
think it's well
100%.
photographed
Yes. These
confidently
are minor
more
gripes.
than this is emblematic of like how people are trading style for substance. Like, no, I think the movie actually just is good looking. That being said, maybe in a broader sense, Brett, when are we gonna get Neon's doing A24 grime? When are we gonna get fucking grime?
I know, I know.
Where's
That's what I
grime?
want. That's what I
Terrifier 3,
want.
Brett's on your list. We'll see, maybe some grime.
Yeah, Terrifier 3 is keeping that dream alive, I think. And maybe they can just like hand over what if like Osgood just handed over the sequel to like just some trash ass horror director, and we got one of
That'd be
those.
great. Dude, I'll
Remember
do
when
it.
like we would get like the horror sequels just used to be so trashy
Yeah,
and
Hills Have
campy
Eyes
and
2.
fun. Yes.
Everything.
And even we've been watching Sword and Sorcery lately, even like Deathstalker 2.
Yeah, make a
One of
shit
Sarah
version.
Freilig's picks, 976 Evil Part 2. The second horror movie used to always be I mean, Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is probably the
Right.
primo example. I would love if Longlegs did if they did a Longlegs
pitch.
2 and it was like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2, I'd be in fucking heaven.
I like it.
Fucking heaven.
I like it.
It could be like a prequel.
I agree with that. And Osgood Perkins he's gonna go on to like the first like 4 frames of Longlegs, I was like, oh, this guy's gonna get gobbled up and make the reboot Jason or whatever.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
he has
yeah.
such
He's
a
gonna
good,
get a big
he has the
franchise.
look of, I know James Wan's already working with him and Blumhouse and stuff. Like he's gonna get a franchise because he has a great look that's built for prestige franchise. But Longlegs, the property, Neon, give us a call. We'll do it for $2 million.
Oh, yes.
Nicolas Cage has to be Longlegs, though. That's the only caveat. And we're gonna do like a Longlegs
yes.
origin story.
I think origin story is like, not always the move, but in this case, I think is the move. Because
I-
there's a lot, again, no spoilers, but like everything that happened before this movie started, there's a lot of like prehistory that they kind of do like this, and
Yep.
they do it effectively. But there's a lot to dig
A lot.
into in the prehistory of this movie.
Could have used more Longlegs in this movie, is my note.
Could have used more Longlegs.
I want that in number 2.
Yes.
More Longlegs in Silence of the Lambs, which I watched last night.
Let's explore the
You get a lot of Anthony Hopkins.
Let's explore the Mark Bolan fandom in our
Yeah.
prequel.
That's
How did that happen?
Oh, Longlegs.
And there's a little shot of like Lou Reed's Transformer in his
Yes.
lair as well. I was like, Longlegs has
Longlegs
great
is
taste
cool.
in music.
Wait, when did Longlegs? Wait, Longlegs is fucking cool. Well, Longlegs lets
Creepy
well, I don't
Longlegs has great
you said-
taste in
no
music.
spoilers. No spoilers. No spoilers.